doesn't always carry, so if you can't hear me, I won't be offended if you say speak up. I just want to say that. So I think many of us are coming from the MLA conference. Thanks for taking away. Especially it was an exhausting day, and I am exhausted too. I had to be polite all day, so I'm going to start with a rude poem. I'll get more polite as I read. Dorothy Wordsworth. The daffodils can go fuck themselves. I'm tired of their crowds, yellow rantings about the spastic sun that shines and shines and shines. How are they any different from me? I, too, have a big, messy head on a fragile stalk. I spin with the wind. I flower and don't apologize. There's nothing funny about good weather. Oh, spring again. The critics nod. They know the old joy, that wakeful quotidian, the dark plot of future growing things, each one labeled Narcissus nobilis or Jennifer Chang. If I died falling from a helicopter, then this would be an important poem. Then the ex-boyfriends would swim to shore, declaiming their knowledge of my bulbous youth. Oh, flower, one said, why aren't you neat? But I won't be another bashful shank. The tulips have their nervous joie de vivre, the lilacs their taunt. Fractious petals, stop interrupting me with your boring beauty. All the boys are in the field gnawing raw bones of ambition and calling it ardor. Who the hell are they? This is a poem about war. So I was asked recently to write a poem about Thomas Jefferson. I know. I went to UVA, and they wanted diverse voices. And it's true. So I resisted the topic for a long time. It was a really hard poem to write. And then one day I went to a stable outside of DC and saw some horses, and there was a horse there. He really exists, named Never. And he inspired me to write this poem, made me think about Jefferson and Virginia and ownership. And that doesn't explain the poem exactly, but it gives you some context about where it's coming from. And so I kind of think atmospherically when I write. So I'm trying to create an atmosphere. Am I speaking loudly enough? Okay. A horse named Never. At the stables, each stall was labeled with a name. Biscuit stood aloof. I faced always, invariably, his clockwork tail. Crab knew the salt lick too well. Trapezoid mastered stillness, a midnight mare. She was sternest and tallest, her chest stretched against the edges of her stall. I was not afraid of Never, the chestnut gelding, so rode his iron haunches as far as Panther Gap. Never and I lived in Virginia then. We could neither flee nor be kept. Seldom did I reach the little mountain without him, the easy crest making valleys of indifferent grasses. What was that low sound I heard, alone with Never? A lone horse, a lodestar, a habit of fear. We think of a horse less as a history of one man and his sorrows than as a history of a whole evil time. I fed him odd lettuce, abundant bitterness. Who wore the bit and harness? Who was the ready steed? Or, I think there be 6 Nevers in the field. He took the carrot, words by my own reckoning, an account of creeks and oyster catchers. I made my account, notes on the state of Virginia. It was bred for show and not to race. Never, I cried, never. Were I more horse than rider, I would better understand the beast I am. Our hoof house rested at the foot of the mountain on which rested another house more brazen than statuary. Let it be known, I first mistook gelding for gilding. I am the fool that has faith in never. Somewhere a gold door, burdened with apology, refuses all mint from the yard. I moved to DC about 3 years ago, and because of various circumstances, I wasn't able to pick out the house or neighborhood we were going to move to. But out of some great fortune, the neighborhood that we found, that my husband found actually, for us to live in, is the greatest neighborhood on earth. Sorry if you think yours is. It's a neighborhood I love, and I've been trying to write about it. It's the kind of neighborhood that people like my husband and I are rooting, coming there with our stroller and our kid and our dog, because there's a great immigrant population. They're hippies. It's kind of tucked away from the rest of the noise of the city, and it feels like a secret. This poem is not really about that. But I'm trying to get an essence of the neighborhood, but also I don't know what I'm doing when I write poems. But the title is the name of my neighborhood, Mount Pleasant. All night, 6 vagrants stood at our stoop, chewing the fat out of a too-stout story. She did this, did that, took that. She never, 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 never. A white fluttering, a thought, like headlights from a passing car, lights up this room, where I've never been restful, never still. Outside, the buses must be enrouting. I hear their slow-going screech around the corner, engines dying. My neighbor's a dinosaur, Bonnie. She's lived here since the commune days, eats hemp seeds, I bet, always nods at me. It's not her out there, but she's in my head, the lonely field I imagine each night, awake again, nowhere else to go. Never is a strange design, to name what can't be or won't begin, the hours quickening, never asleep. Or the trees' silence, incanting I'll never belong. My silent habit is to listen, for I knew these trees once as a different self. I'll never speak to her again or stand outside like the trees, attending to what's limitless, the sky, stray faces at stray windows. I couldn't hear back then, walking the night bars, not trusting how to follow, how to wend. Now it's the noise of mastery, the mastery of being alive, annoyed. I said my piece is what I'd like to say, or my piece is still a part of there. I'm bad at idiom, as anyone can hear, as anyone can see. There's an immigrant on my face who makes me stray, makes me tired of you and you and you, all of you, but never outside my window. Here I turn to tinder, stone, turn to the body in the dark. I turn mortal and loathsome as bitumen, blacking out a new roof. I turn up Florida Avenue, up 16th. I turn like milk, unforgivably sour. A sudden turncoat, I'll turn on you. My ideology a tourniquet. I turn my face towards your light, alas, the last of which will not return to me. I'm turning off now. Good night, America. Good night, neighbor. I did not know your art was law, or that you sailed a boat on the Potomac, could parse the grammar of daffodils. Tonight is Sunday. On Friday you died, crowding the mailroom with you last week. I wondered whether to note the winter drag, the government shut down again by brief falling snow. Neighbor, I jumped circulars and lost hope. I sighed, let my son cry too loudly, Bonnie, Bonnie, rather than turn to you to wish you good night. Dear Bonnie, I wish you good night. It's a longer poem I'm going to read. And it's about walking in the woods. Actually, I grew up in New Jersey, which is in a very wooded area, and whenever I return, especially in the winter time, I go back to the woods where I used to play as a child with my dog, and that's sort of the genesis of this poem. The title is, We Found the Body of a Young Deer Once. Whitetails flicker like light in the winter woods, where my dog and I crack open the early morning, the ground a frozen patchwork of leaves, the brittle ice of dirt. So much of walking is description. Late in the year, the sun stops us cold. Or walking is comparison. These woods in New Jersey seem a passing thought, Ohioan. Then I recall that late thaw one March in New Hampshire. Or I'm 10 again, wondering where I last saw the deer carcass. Maybe by the creek, maybe loose ribs, a skull tucked into snow. As children, we set old logs against a middling elm, thatched branches into a sort of rooftop, called our dwelling Antelope. My friend and I, we ignored the sky, cutting into our shelter, and made walls of found particle board, fragmentary, damp, worthless as kindling. Her mother worshipped Zoroaster. Her father had an Irish-American mistress. Stub of birch, first rime braying the last moss. The ground fascinates a spray of blue jays. Because the earth won't hold together, deeper in is still nowhere. I've dug through seasons of leaves, cold rot, hardly insoluble, crumbling through my fingers. I climbed a tree, crossed a swamp in bare feet. I judged the clouds for their blue avarice, foolish dispersal. At home, she spoke her language, and I at mine. Where do the frogs go in winter? What time is it? I hated her for being braver. She wanted habits to make sense. She liked to win. Every day she needed to know where I was going. The best walking is without reason, formless, scattering the self into thinking, more winter. The deer were fleet, mild, and unassuming. I want to describe them as darts, though they evinced no danger, legs limber, outflung, almost tree-like in their slender extension, almost flying. In their swift silence and anxiety, they flee from me, they fled. I had made a noise, my dog's breath quickening, my interest remapping the woods as subtly more mine. An image I know well, yet nevertheless despise. Is the past a failure, or am I? Whose woods these are, after all, is a question only a god would ask. So yes, my sight seizes all, a memory of land, a friend I'll never see again. Her father, as a university student, had dined with the Shah. Whenever her mother polished the silver, we joked, the Shah is coming to tea. From upstairs, we could smell duck stewing in walnuts and pomegranate syrup. Later, the darkest meat fell to pieces onto bright, articulate rice. It was like eating a secret, my mouth stunned by acid sweetness, a terrible hunger I could not explain to my own mother. I wanted more. Another plate of Fessenden, please. Instead, into the winter woods we ran after this new world that knew nothing of what we hid on our tongues, other words for dust, revolution, and snow. We dismissed our appetites. We forgot our fathers. I love the birches for their austerity, the peeling white bark, pages torn from an old book. I love the outstretched affirmation of oaks, more certain in leaflessness. In winter, you have to know the bark to know the tree. You have to look hard and not doubt the spine and bulb. Branches, twigs, roots often foster anonymity, and this too I love. Farther, farther, I am going into the dark of the mind. That neighbor girl, my friend, she goes by Mrs. Black now, so I hear, lives out west, plants tulips every November, and come spring sighs each one mid-stem. A crystal vase in the breakfast nook, Cheerios in her son's bowls, her dumb, accomplished husband nodding at the clock. It was with her I found the body of a young deer, fallen in a clearing, fresh snow powdering the deer's coat like fresh ash fallen from a proximate fire. Quiet, quieter than I've ever been with anyone. We shared the death. We stood quietly, the sky open and gray above us. We never said a word about the deer. I imagined that winter as humming decay, the woods beastly, skeletal, far reach of the trees, the deer's bone cage stripped clean of flesh. She showed me a map of Iran and my father's world atlas. In Tehran, they had had many servants, including a gardener and a night nurse for her and her brother, though she was too young to remember any of this. The day after solstice, I note an emerald shine to the pale sky. On the question of origin, she explained Persian. Once I described my mother as always angry. She was born amidst a civil war. But mostly, my childhood was a quiet one. It was not until years later that I learned others had considered our family strange. So, one last poem. Short. Thanks for coming. I really like Patsy Cline. She fills me up with feeling, and that's what this is about. Patsy Cline. She's in the desert, releasing the ashes of her father, the ashes of her child, or the ashes of the world. She's not what she observes, the rare spiny star. It does not belong to her. Bright needle threading a cloud through the sky. There's sun enough. There's afterlife. Her own body a pillar of ash. I fall to pieces, she says. Faithless nimbus, faithless thought. In my life, I have lost two men. One by death, inevitable. One by error, a waste. He leapt from a northern state, hunger too cold for human knowledge. Once I was a woman with nothing to say. Never did I say ash to ash. Never has a desert woken me up. I said, who releases whom? Inevitably, all have known what the desert knows. No one will count the lupin when I'm gone. No one looks to the sun for me. For meat, I've done so much less. Cattle in the far basin, sagebrush, sage. I live in the city where I loved that man, the ash of him, the self's argument. Now and then, I think of his weeping, how my body betrays me. I am not done with releasing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and John. Incredible reading. Thank you for coming to Malvern Books tonight. If you want to stick around in a few minutes, have some food. Jennifer and John will sign books, won't you?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. And then in a few minutes, we're going to have another reading. So stick around. We're going to have some fun tonight. Thank you. Thanks again for coming.
Yes, it was.
That was great.